Polymeric sand is one of the #1 callbacks in the industry as far as going back to your jobs. We want that to be a foolproof process. We brought in Greg Crouse from SEK Surebond to help us put in this polymeric sand. The first thing I want to do is start cutting these bags open and throwing them down, Greg, but there's something you tell me that there's a way I got to do that even.
I will, for sure. One of the things we want to make sure is before we do any polymeric sand, we want to make sure our surface is clean and dry. So we don't necessarily have to clean the surface with chemicals, but we want to make sure that there's not dirt and debris from construction left on the surface. With the polymeric sand, it's important not to bulldoze the bags. Bulldozing means dump the whole pile right here and then push it from across the project. The polymers are the smallest part of the mix. So if I push it from here to there, we are running the risk that we don't have a consistent spread of the polymers across that area. Keep the bag low to the ground. So one of the production tips to get more done in a day, when you're sweeping in the polymeric sand, go with the joints. So parallel and perpendicular. It just tends to fill a little faster.
So right now you're trying to fill the joint up the whole way?
Yep, because we're gonna run the compactor over it to consolidate the sand here in a little bit.
This little piece is vulnerable to not be in the correct spot, so I'm just gonna make sure it is. Give a little bit of my hand broom to make sure that that piece is sitting where it needs to sit.
So we've got the sand pretty much up to the top of the joints. We've swept off the bulk of the sand. The next step is to blow it off. We don't need very much volume of air. We're just kind of getting the dust off. For this stage, I really like the electric blowers. They're handy, and it ties in with all the other equipment we have.
And I have a horror story that I leaked oil out of a gas blower.
That happens.
That's when I made the switch to electric blower.
So just, you can use the low setting on the blower, and you can use multiple blowers if you want, and just kind of get the dust off of the surface.
So we got this all swept off our first sweep, and we're going to talk about compaction now.
One of the unfortunate calls that I get multiple times throughout the year is guys will use a plate compactor at this point without a pad. So if you're going to run a compactor on the surface of the pavers, a plate compactor with a pad is fine. There's aftermarket ones out there that are great for a few $100s. My preference is to really invest in a roller compactor. It's an isolated machine, meaning I can only use it on the surface. I can't compact gravel with it, but it's a different process what we're doing on the surface. And you can use this machine, or you can use a plate with a pad, not only to set your pavers before you do the polymeric sand, but also to consolidate the polymeric sand. I just wanted to take a moment and look. I did one pass on the perimeter, I did one pass on this side, and one pass down the middle, and that's compacted enough.
Sure, yeah. So it doesn't have to necessarily line up right next to the other.
We don't have to go line after line after line. With the roller compactor to consolidate the sand, I can space it out.
Yeah, because the consolidation is what we're looking for.
That's all we're looking for. We're just getting the air out of it. If I'm setting my pavers, then I want to go line after line after line to set the pavers in place. But for the sand, we need very little compaction. Now the next step, you can see our heights are not where we want them to be.
Right, this was at the top when we started.
It was at the top when we started. The next step is to basically start over, sweep sand over the surface again, but now we're going to pay more attention to sweeping off and setting our heights. And this is super important, and I think it's a good spot to at least mention it. It doesn't matter what sand you're using, polymeric sand or permeable chips or resin sand needs to be 1/8 of an inch from the top of the paver minimum. So on these pavers, there's a chamfer. So we want our height to be at the bottom of that chamfer or approximately 1/8 of an inch from the top. The Matoni doesn't have a chamfered edge. It's got a square edge, and actually where this joint ended up, that is perfect.
Yeah, I think
1/8 of an inch. So once these guys get a little bit ahead of me, I'm gonna change my sweeping direction a little bit. I'm now gonna go with my final sweep at a 45-degree angle to the joints. And if I do that correctly, it should set the elevation of the sand perfectly. It can be lower than 1/8 of an inch when you're all done, but 1/8 of an inch is the minimum. But you can see using a little finer broom here, and it's really setting the elevations exactly where I need it.
As you come across, yeah.
At a 45-degree angle.
I couldn't even do that sweep in parallel.
It's kind of skipping over it.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you do have polymeric sand left over and it's clean and dry, you can put it in a bucket or back in the bag, and it can be reused. Just keep it clean and keep it dry. And for storage, you want it to be dry as well. So the next step, we've got everything swept off. We've got the heights where we want them. So the next step is to blow it very similarly to how we did the first blowing, but I'm gonna pay more detail.
Sure.
So while I'm blowing, I'm checking out under my coping, I'm checking out the corners, I'm checking out my heights, because that can all be cleaned and adjusted with the blower.
This is our last look because pretty soon here we're gonna get this wet.
Yep.
So we're just constantly looking. This is the last time we're looking at the height of these and making sure
Right.
everything is filled.
Make sure it's not too low, make sure it's not too high. Again, we're shooting for at least 1/8 of an inch height below the top of the paver or the bottom of the chamfer. And this is our opportunity to fix that
To finally adjust it.
and finally adjust it.
Yeah. All right, so what's the most important step when putting in any type of polymeric sand, Greg?
Reading the instructions. 90% of the problems come from watering. I'm not blaming contractors for that, because as a polymeric sand industry, since 1999, polymeric sand has been on the market. As an industry, we have told you 37 different ways to put polymeric sand in. So everything we've done so far is pretty much applicable to any sand on the market. You got to sweep it in, you got to compact it, you got to blow it off. Where we part ways as manufacturers is when it comes to the watering. And that's what's confusing for guys. So our method has been the same for the last 15 years since PolySweep's been on the market. Exact same formula, exact same watering instructions. We do a more traditional 3 waterings. Some sands on the market set up super fast to get you rain safe, and they require a different watering. If you use my method with theirs or theirs with mine, you're gonna have problems. But the whole goal with any polymeric sand is to get that joint fully saturated at this point. The benefit that we have is that you can't really overwater PolySweep. So we'll show you how to check that joint and to make sure that it's fully saturated, and you'll be good to go. So you really want to find a decent nozzle, an adjustable nozzle for different things. Whether we're putting in polymeric sand or whether we're cleaning or sealing or whatever we're doing. For me personally, what I teach the guys in my territory is to use the flat or the fan setting. Yeah. So I'm taking the control of the watering off of the nozzle and putting it on me.
Yeah, and we'll see as you get going here. I always describe it as like painting.
Painting a car,
you know?
Exactly. So with PolySweep, our first watering is super fast. Now, we did say in the instructions to wait 5 minutes between waterings, but keep in mind, I'm gonna start here, and by the time I get around to the other side of the project, it's already been 5 minutes.
Yeah, right.
And what we're waiting for, remember, we left the joints low to accept water. So the waiting period is specifically to allow that water to soak in. If I come back around for my second watering, there's still water sitting there, I might wanna wait a few minutes. You can see I'm just changing the color of the paver, just getting it wet enough to break that surface tension, getting the sand just a little wet. And I'm pointing almost vertical or just at a slight angle, because I don't want to go at too heavy an angle and wash the sand out of the joint. So the second watering is exactly the same. When I've got a pitched project, it's got a good amount of slope to it, then I want to start on the bottom. I want those joints to start to fill up with a little bit of water. We just want it to, so it'll soak in. We want to set a little bit of water in there. The tighter the joint, you may need to water more times just because it's not accepting the water as much. There's not as much sand in it. So the third watering, we're going to do the same thing. Now, from an efficiency point of view, you could technically follow me and blow the excess water off. And one of the things that I'm super adamant about, whenever you put water on a patio, whether we're doing polymeric sand, whether we're cutting and rinsing off the wet cutting and rinsing off the slurry, dry cutting and rinsing off the dust, cleaning and sealing, I really truly believe you should blow off the excess water. The other thing I would suggest, because we have the Series 3000, or if you were using a sand mold paver, like let's say like a Belden 560, what I would suggest is, again, because I can't really overwater PolySweep, let's just kind of work together and kind of clean that out of there.
Because it's a rough
texture. So just scrub lightly.
Because you're talking about the texture.
The Series 3000 from Unilock has that texture on it, and I'm gonna almost rinse off that surface.
Like this, right?
Yep.
I think Unilock El Campo finish.
El Campo would be a good one as well, yes.
I like that.
You don't need to do it on a regular paver. Those are kind of special circumstances.
Right.
This is one of the reasons.
Rough and,
yep.
And gritty. That's why we're doing it.
This is one of the reasons why I can do clay molds and travertine and bluestone, because either I'll rinse it off on the final or I'll scrub it off on the final.
Yeah. We're not worried about too much water.
Nope. All right, so we did the watering, we followed the instructions, awesome, but how do we know if that joint is wet enough? So it's a super simple test. Take out a knife or a screwdriver, find a little bit wider joint. So we're gonna take this joint here, there's a little gap, and I'm literally gonna stick my knife down in there, and I'm gonna make a hole. So if I look down in there, I've now created a column that's standing on its own. What I'm looking for is loose sand at the bottom. So if I had dug that hole and it's held the column on the top, but there was loose beach sand on the bottom, all I have to do with PolySweep is water it again. Then you simply put the sand back into the joint, smooth it out, and you're good to go. Sure. On a project of this size, 500-600 square feet, I would probably check 6 or 8 joints. Like in the art line, I can just literally stick it down in there. And when I pull up, I'm able to tell on the knife that there's dry sand or wet sand.
Just like when you bake a cake.
Just like when you bake a cake, 100%. And then I just tap it down in. Checking the joint is the only way to know.
Yeah.
So, and that's not exclusive to PolySweep. Any polymeric sand has to be saturated top to bottom at the time of watering.
Whether it's your first mist
or your
right. Fourth or
so
fifth.
That's why it's so important to read the manufacturer's bags, because the method we did today is perfect for PolySweep. It's not perfect for the other sands on the market. So that's why it's so important.
Awesome.
So we want to minimize foot traffic on this and vehicular traffic for a minimum of 24 hours.
Okay.
But we definitely don't want to put any patio furniture on, because remember, the sand's not going to get hard until it dries, and if I create a shady spot with a table, it may not dry as fast. So
simply tell our clients, hey, 24 hours, let this set up, then you can start bringing out the furniture and driving and walking.
Yep, do whatever they want to do.
So we gave you a few tips and tricks out here, but to dive into that full tutorial on the website, check out hardscapementor.com.